When I was around 8 years old, I had my first drink of alcohol. What I remember most clearly was a feeling of profound relaxation. I've always been a very neurotic person. I drank on and off throughout my childhood when alcohol was available or easy to steal at parties or with my older siblings. My father was an alcoholic, so that helped. There was always beer in the fridge, and it would be easy to sneak one when he was drunk. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew all along that when I turned 21, I would be able to fully consummate my relationship with alcohol. And to no one's surprise, that is exactly what happened. And I was happy. I was happy that after waiting for so many years, I was finally able to drink whenever I wanted to, and as much as I wanted to. I've been going to therapy for 5 or 6 years now, on and off, and that started around the time I was 18. But therapy had never really done anything for me at that point. I had tried SSRIs with little success, and alcohol just took the edge off. It let me relax, it let me feel like I was having a good time without worrying about whatever problem my brain could conjure up to worry over. I don't know if I would say I was content, but it helped me to ignore my problems. Even now, I feel like being drunk, or having been drunk, is one of the only things that's ever really allowed me to live in the moment. I spend most of my life living in my head. After about a year of drinking, with no limit, I reconnected with a girl that I really liked, and I thought if I ever want to be with her, I need to be good enough. So I tried really hard to do just that. I did all of the things that I thought you were supposed to do. I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking, I started exercising regularly, I started working on all of my creative hobbies every day. And this was leading into my first year at this job, and my first real promotion was coming up. And I was excited, I felt great, and I got the girl that I wanted to be with. And those first few months, it was like I was drunk on love. When I was with her, I felt present in the moment, I felt grounded. I felt like my life had a purpose, and that my purpose was to be with her and to make her happy. And it just felt like I was on top of the world and everything was going my way. Shortly after, I started taking a continuing education course that was sponsored by my employer in the hopes of getting another promotion somewhere down the line. And there came a period where I was really overwhelmed. I was working every day, and then I would come home, I would cook dinner. She worked late, so I liked to have dinner ready when she got home, and then I would work on school until bedtime. But I felt like I was doing really good. I felt like I was doing the right thing, even though I was completely overwhelmed. There was a work party, a going away party for one of my colleagues, and I was invited, and you could also bring a plus one. So we went together, and I ended up having a couple beers there. She didn't really think much of it. I think I had briefly explained to her that I had a drinking problem, but I don't think she really understood. But it was just a couple beers, and I thought everything would be fine. But it wasn't. Fast forward a couple weeks, and me and her are drinking together at home every so often. She doesn't have a problem with it. She's not thinking about drinking every day, but I am, and I'm always waiting. And maybe sometimes when she's not home, I'll drink a little bit before she gets home. But I'm hiding it, and I don't want her to find out. Well, drinking a little bit sometimes before she comes home turns into me crying on the floor, incoherent, drunk, one day when she gets home from work. And she didn't like that, obviously. And I said, okay, this has got to stop. I really can't be drinking. This was the next day. I tried to really explain to her my relationship with alcohol, and I tried for a while, maybe a few months. I was sober, and then her friend was coming in to visit from out of state. We all met up, had like a double date, and she thought that it would be okay for me to drink. Now, in the back of my head, I knew that it wasn't, but I really wanted to drink. And then it all started again. The same cycle, only worse this time. And I think that's when she started to fall out of love with me. Long story short, my alcoholism was a very large contributing factor to the ending of that relationship. And at the time, I just remember being so angry and so sad and blaming her for the whole thing. And she did play a part in that, but I think things could have ended differently. I spent the next 2 years of my life drinking. I started going to therapy again, but I would show up to every session drunk. This time was also leading up to my promotion. And every day I would sleep for 3 or 4 hours, wake up still drunk, go into work, pound a couple of energy drinks, and work like an angry bastard for 10 or 12 hours, start drinking on the way home, and just watch YouTube or play video games and get drunk, order out food, go to sleep, and do it again the next day. I had a brief scare in the middle of this period where I threw up. And I don't usually throw up when I'm drunk. You know, I kind of took pride in the fact that I could always balance myself on the edge of being not quite too drunk to function or to get myself to bed, you know. I never blacked out, not very often. But I threw up and I noticed blood in the toilet. And this scared me pretty bad. I mean, I was drunk, so it didn't scare me that bad, but I thought, you know, I guess I'm gonna have to see somebody about this. So I went to the doctor, and he did an exam, and he said I had damaged my throat. The acidity from the ciders I was drinking, combined with heartburn from eating right before bed every night, had hurt my esophagus and caused it to bleed. Now, obviously, the doctor told me that I needed to stop drinking, and I told him I would, but I didn't. I just switched to vodka. The thought of quitting passed my mind a couple times, usually only when I had screwed up, or showed up late for work because I was too hungover, or done things I shouldn't have with colleagues that I shouldn't have been hanging out with outside of work. But the memories of all of my screw-ups were very hard to sit with, and the only thing that made that go away was drinking. You know, alcohol was my panacea. It let me be okay with being me. It gave me something to look forward to. You know, things will be better at the end of the day when I get home and I can drink. And then I got really sick. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I started to feel so tired. More tired than I'd ever felt before. People at work started to tell me that I looked pale. They started congratulating me on losing weight. I couldn't lift things that I used to be able to lift quite easily. I had a hard time walking up the stairs, and eventually I felt so sick that I couldn't even drink anymore. Long story short, I ended up in the ER with type 1 diabetes and diabetic ketone acidosis. Now at this point, I'd been sober for about a week, which is the longest span I had had for the past 2 years. And being in the ER was miserable, but the day that I got out, I felt free, you know. I thought, this is a chance for me to turn a new leaf. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. And I stayed sober, and I learned how to live with diabetes. And the next month was probably one of the happiest and most productive months of my life. I was constantly thinking and planning about how I wanted to spend my time when I got home. There was just an explosion of creative energy. You know, I was working on art, writing, music, and I really thought that the rest of my life would be just this good. But that feeling waned gradually until it was almost entirely gone. And I felt guilty because of it, you know? How is it possible that just a couple months ago, I was doing all these great things and living my life so well, and now I can't even take a shower. After doing some reading and watching some videos, I learned that this period in sobriety is often called the pink cloud, where it feels like a new beginning, a new you, but it doesn't last that long. And now I am trying to learn how to cope with who I am. I've gone through several courses of medication without much luck so far, and a lot of the time I feel hopeless. Just sitting with these feelings, the feelings that I've been hiding from for years, the constant anxiety, occasional panic. But I feel like I'm starting to learn about myself. Things that I wasn't able to learn when I could use alcohol to cope. I think I've learned that my anxiety is the ultimate source of a lot of my other mental problems. And my anxiety makes me depressed. I'm trying to figure out what I can do to combat that. But I've wasted this much of my life waiting to feel better, getting drunk to feel better, and relying on other people to feel better. So I think it's time to start getting on with things.